When David HaMelech sinned, he asked Hashem not to remove his spirit from him. Does that mean Hashem's spirit can inhabit an unholy vessel? So David HaMelech did not sin. Gemara Masechet Shabbat, page 54, I believe, 55, says anyone that thinks that David HaMelech sinned is mistaken. David HaMelech did not sin. But David HaMelech in his level was judged as if there was a damage on his record because of the way things looked like to people. Batsheva, she was initially created for the marriage with David. She was created for David already at Masechet Bereshit, the creation of the world. But David HaMelech made a mistake after he killed a Goliath. One of the terms of the deal was to chop off the loser's head and show it to the winning side. So Goliath was so big that the only way to chop off his head is that he needed Goliath's sword. Because David HaMelech, first of all, how did he even kill Goliath? David HaMelech was a little kid with a slingshot, a couple of rocks. Goliath was a giant. And his whole body, including his head, was platinum. So he is literally like a tank, a giant tank. So how do you kill a giant tank with two rocks? David HaMelech knew names of angels, and he commanded the angel of steel to serve him and say that if you open up the steel, once I shoot this rock. Once I become king, I'm gonna make a decree to change the knife that's currently being used for Brit Milah, which was made out of stone in those days, and change it into a metal knife. And that way, you'll be able to be a part of every mitzvah of Brit Milah. The angel of metal obviously agreed, and as soon as David HaMelech shot his rock at Goliath, the angel of metal opened up the shield that covered the head of Goliath, so the rock hit him in the head and killed him. Now, that's only half the battle. The other half is that you have to chop off Goliath's head. He's a giant. You can't do it with a slingshot, with the little knife that David HaMelech had. This guy was literally a tank. So David HaMelech needed the sword of Goliath. The problem is that Goliath, because he was a warrior, he had special tools, and even his sword was tied to his arm, to his hand, so he wouldn't drop it. As part of a war, he had to make sure that his sword was always in his hand, and it could never fall out of his hand. So he had a professional tie his sword to his hand in a knot that is almost impossible to break. Impossible to break. So David HaMelech tried to break it. He couldn't do it. Couldn't even cut this thing. He wanted, so what do you do? So he made an announcement. Whoever opens up this knot, I promise him that I'm going to give him a shidduch, a woman, the best woman in the world. Who comes up? Uriah Hittite. Uriah Hittite comes up, and he's able to untie this tie. Why? Because Uriah Hittite is the one that tied it in the first place. He was the guy. He actually did a service for Goliath. He was fighting, he was on the wrong side. Now, Hashem got mad at David for making such a statement. Who are you to give people a wife? So I'll give them your wife. And that's how Batsheva ended up with Uriah initially. And David HaMelech knew it. He knew it's a punishment. He knew that Batsheva was his. He knew in our neshama, he had Ruach HaKodesh. So now, after David became king, eventually seeing a Batsheva, this was during a time where there was a war going on, and Uriah was in the war. He was a soldier. One of the terms that they had in the kingdom of David was that anyone that goes to war divorces their wife first. They divorce their wife. That way, if they die in battle and no one knows where their body is, their wives can continue on and marry somebody else. So all of the wives would stay home. They would be divorced. And some were, most women, remained loyal to the person that went to war, and they would marry him again once they came back from war. In this case, when David HaMelech went with Batsheva, she was not married to Uriah because she was divorced. He went to war. But because David HaMelech, once he knew that she was connected to Uriah, he was really supposed to wait for Uriah to die, or to go elsewhere. But I think it was to die, and he didn't wait. Instead, he invited Uriah to go back with his wife. Uriah did not want to follow what David HaMelech says, without even knowing what David HaMelech did. He did not want to listen to David. And on top of it, he gave a compliment to somebody else in front of David, both of which are considered desecration of the kinghood, which is our death penalty. So Uriah deserved a death penalty, multiple death penalties, and that's why David HaMelech sent him back to war and put him in the front lines where he died. The point is that because David HaMelech already was together with Batsheva before it became known that Uriah died, before it became known of what really transpired here, it looked bad in the eyes of certain people. Righteous people knew it, but so the wicked people didn't give him any benefit of the doubt. And so in the level of David, it was a damage. Level of any person on planet Earth, it's not a problem at all. It's perfectly allowed. Now David HaMelech knew that his very high level neshama, which aspired to become one of the forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, David, that's what he wanted Hashem to do. He knew that he had to be perfect above and beyond, and this damage caused him to lose his Ruach HaKodesh for a period of time, because he, in essence, Hashem was giving him an ability to purify himself, to fix himself. So, number one, the first kid that he had with Batsheva died, the baby died, and then on top of it, he lost his Ruach HaKodesh for a period of time, and he also got Tzarat. So he had multiple, whips from Hashem in order to purify his neshama again to the perfect status. So he then before the Ruach HaKodesh was able to come back to him, and so on. So he was always connected to Hashem, but when the connection that he had with Ruach HaKodesh versus without Ruach HaKodesh were a world of difference, where he felt that without Ruach HaKodesh, he felt that it was worse than death. And that's what you're referring to. He felt that not having Ruach HaKodesh, which meant a degree of separation from Hashem, to him, at his level, he says it's better for him to die than to be separated from Hashem. That's how much David HaMelech loved HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That for him not to be at the highest possible level that he can be meant worse than death. So he was willing and happy to get all of the suffering of death and tzarat and all the horrible things that happened to him throughout his whole life. Just don't make me separate from Hashem. That was something he couldn't handle. And that was the last part of the test, and obviously Hashem gave him back to Ruach HaKodesh. But as far as a Hashem inhabiting an unholy spirit, Hashem is everywhere. Hashem and Od Milvado. He is everything. There is nothing else but Him. But there is different aspects of Him that He shows. There's different aspects of Him that He unfolds and allows us to see, allows us to feel. So for example, Bilam was the prophet of the Gentiles, and he had certain powers that even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have. Now, he had prophecy, he spoke to Hashem. We see it in the Torah, that he speaks to Hashem. Bilam, he was filthy, he was disgusting, he was married to a donkey. So the Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah asks, how did this filthy, disgusting person that's married to a donkey, how is he able to speak to Hashem and get prophecy? So the Gemara says, he's called the man of one eye, because he only had one eye, and the other eye was just a hole in his head. And that hole in the head that he had didn't have any sins, because it didn't make any sins. It's a hole in the head. So it's through that tiny hole that Hashem's prophecy will go through. Why? Because the rest of his body was impure. So meaning that even the most unholy person, the most disgusting person, had to have a place that remained pure in order for Hashem's prophecy to go through. But the other prophets, if you look at the Shmona Prakim by the Rambam, you see that the Rambam explains why did Moshe Rabbeinu called the highest of all prophets? What's the difference between him and all of the other prophets, Isaiah, Zechariah, Ezekiel, and so on, all of the other great prophets? What's the difference? And he explains that each prophet perfected themselves, their character traits to a certain level. And in essence, the more they perfected themselves, the more clear their prophecy was. Sort of like, and the Rambam gives this example 900 years ago, or 800 years ago, and he says, it's like one prophet is hearing God's voice, but you see the way that the prophecy is written in our books, it's not really understandable without commentary, and even with the commentary, there are a lot of things that we have difficulty understanding. Like, for example, Ezekiel the prophet, he starts talking about all the things that happen in heaven. Nobody understands what's going on. What is he talking about? There's the chariot, there's this, all of these extraordinary, amazing things. We have no concept of what he saw. Yes, you can make a picture in your mind of what you think he saw, but it's literally almost zero in comparison to what he actually really saw. Now, on the other hand, the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is the 5 books of Moses, anyone can pick up the 5 books of Moses and understand, at the very least, part of what they're reading, even if they're just reading it literally. Not everything, obviously, but they could certainly understand parts of it. So we see that the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu is the clearest, the language of the 5 books of Moses is the clearest out of all of the books. Every other book after it becomes more and more difficult to understand. The highest prophet after Moshe Rabbeinu was Isaiah. But again, if you compare the clarification of Isaiah to the 5 books of Moses, they're nothing alike in comparison as far as clarity. So again, but then if you compare Isaiah to some of the other prophets, again, there's nothing alike. So that's because the prophet himself, says the Rambam, perfected themselves, perfected their character traits, and the more they perfected themselves, the more clear their prophecy was. So that means that, let's say, one prophet, he's getting Hashem's message, but it's unclear. Similar to if, let's say, there's one person that's behind the wall, or there's 2 people behind, that are in 2 parts of a wall. Okay, there's a wall between them, and the wall is cement. The wall is cement. So when one person screams, "Yo!" and the other guy says, "What? Oh, what'd you say? I understand. Oh, okay. What are you doing?" He says, What are you doing? Okay, I understand. What are you doing? Okay, doing. What? I'm not sure, but you understand part of what's going on. Then the other guy has perfected himself even more. He's not separated by concrete. He's separated by, let's say, sheetrock. Something thinner. So the guy says, "What are you doing?" He says, "What are you doing?" "Yeah, I got that. What are you doing?" "Tomorrow." "Oh, morrow? What's morrow? Who's morrow?" "I understand part of what you said. What are you doing morrow?" "But I'm not getting the morrow part." Then the next guy perfected himself even more. He's separated by something even thinner. So the guy goes, "What are you doing tomorrow?" "Okay, what am I doing tomorrow?" You want to go? Where? Who's go? Where? You understand most of it. But again, it's not perfect. Why? Because it's still a separation. And then there is glass, as if there's nothing in between them. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. "What are you doing tomorrow? Do you want to go to a Shiur Torah and get chizuk from Rabbi Yaron Reuven?" "Yeah, of course. Why not? There's nobody else that I would like to learn from better." "Oh, okay, great. That's Moshe Rabbeinu." The other parts I added. But that's the point. His prophecy is as clear as can possibly be. Why? Because he perfected himself to the level where it's as if he's right next to God. The other prophets were lesser and lesser, but still, again, and we have no real concept of what a prophet is. These were all the holiest, the purest, most extraordinary people that ever lived. But for the sake of our understanding, that's how the Rambam explains all of this in Shmona Prakim. I believe it's chapter 7. There's a whole section about it.